Today on 7th Circle Gaming, for the first time we're analyzing a game in the Call of Duty series, and the game that we've chosen is Vanguard. Now, the more observant of you might have noticed that this is actually our second video about this particular game, and we did notice that there were some points that were missed the first time around, and the game didn't necessarily get all the credit it deserved, so we're releasing this second video. We will begin as we usually do with the full disclosure, and you're welcome to pause the video here and read through all of this, or if you would prefer not to, skip it and we'll move on to the screenshots. Now, in our first screenshot, we usually share with you what the game world looks like and talk about the user interface. However, we cannot see the user interface because it's hidden by the properties of the game. So we will just be discussing the in-game world. And what we're seeing is a very realistically rendered version of 1940s Russia, complete with the traditional fiddler on the roof. In our next screenshot, we're taking another look at the in-game world, and this is from the one and only vehicle segment that the campaign mode has. The game world continues to be very beautifully rendered. We do get a sneak peek at the user interface, which is centered on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, displaying not only the ammunition, but the ammunition pool available to the player. In our next screenshot, we have a sample of one of the in-game story cutscenes. Again, the in-game world is very beautifully rendered. We also see that the story is being relayed through a naturalistic conversation between two characters. So then, with all of the screenshots covered, let's move on to our first proper chapter, and that is, as always, immersion. Here the game is earned a 5.75. The game will be utilizing primarily presentation to get players invested into the world. It's presented in a first-person perspective, so the world has to look really good, and in truth it absolutely does live up to that promise. The game world is very realistically rendered, complete with again the sort of semi-traditional fiddler on the roof. The game will utilize challenge to get players invested into the world, this taking the form primarily of fast-paced action and limited resources, mostly being ammunition. The game will, for some players, be attempting to utilize story to get them invested into the world, in the sense that the in-game events are presented as part of a much larger plot, which of course applies to all of the solo game modes that we were able to evaluate. Now, whether or not the story works for every player is going to be dependent on the individual. Lastly, the game will provide players with a degree of player agency. However, this is really only going to be in the form of which weapon they choose to utilize at that particular moment, which may be governed more by the availability of ammunition for it or other concerns. So it really is a minor aspect of the immersion. Moving on now to difficulty. On this front, the game has earned a 7 out of 15. The user interface is very simple when it's visible. The key commands are also fairly simple. However, players that have specialized gaming mice may find the buttons awkward, as the game doesn't provide very many hints about which button does which, whether button 4, 5, or 6 does one thing or another. The game provides only basic difficulty settings. However, by playing the game on multiple different difficulty settings, it seems that what the difficulty settings adjust is the player health pool. The game can be used either with a gamepad or keyboard and mouse, and the game very helpfully alerts the player to the presence of a gamepad or a mouse and keyboard when the game is started. The first time the player does use the gamepad, though, they will need to activate the gamepad controls. But that's very easily done. Now then, let's move on and ask the question of what is it that's going to keep the game installed on player hard drives and continue to get them playing through the game. For last appeal, Call of Duty Vanguard has earned a 9 out of 15. There are 2 game modes available for solo play and multiplayer modes, including multiplayer and ranked play. Within those game modes, there are multiple maps and multiple objectives, which is what's really earning the game the additional credit there. There is no mod support that we've been able to find through any website that does not require additional logins or does not present a risk of downloading viruses. The DLC that we've been able to find at present is cosmetic only, though it may be that in the future there is future story-centered DLC content. Players may choose to retry specific missions or retry the entire campaign on a higher or lower difficulty setting. The story may appeal to some players, but we would just repeat again that the game does have additional game modes with the additional objectives, which really are pushing that score of 9 out of 15. So then, overall, where does the game stand? Well, the first Call of Duty game analyzed on the channel has earned a 7.25 out of 15. Players are likely to be immersed in the action more than the story, with the one exception that there is one character that gets a significant amount of exposition more than the other characters do. The game can be played reasonably with a gamepad or keyboard and mouse without much technical bother or faffing or nonsense. The game provides the quick action, the 30 seconds of fun per the developer, that players have come to expect from the series. There are a selection of game modes available, even if players are playing solo. The game is also technically competent. Players are very unlikely to experience bugs of any degree, whether they are minor or a complete crash to desktop. We would say more, but since we are attempting to avoid any commentary on the historical accuracy or the weapons accuracy of the game, we will just end the video here and say thanks very much for watching all the way to the end. If you did, we look forward to seeing you on our next video, and from 7th Circle Gaming, goodbye.